They were called different. Now they're called geniuses. These autistic minds didn't just adapt, they changed the world forever. He didn't speak much as a child. In fact, people thought something was wrong. Lionel Messi was small, shy, and deeply focused. So focused that once he had a soccer ball at his feet, the world around him faded away. He was later believed to show signs of autism spectrum traits, especially Asperger's, something often noted by those who've studied his development and behavior. What looked like detachment was actually a laser-sharp concentration that would shape the future of football. Messi didn't need big speeches. He let his feet do the talking. On the pitch, he wasn't just good, he was surgical. Experts noticed early on that he played differently. He didn't just chase the ball like other kids, he anticipated it. He read patterns, spaces, and player behavior in a way that seemed almost superhuman. Autism in this case didn't hold him back. It gave him a unique way of seeing the game. Growing up in Rosario, Argentina, Messi faced a lot. From hormone deficiencies that affected his growth to being the quietest boy on the field. But that same quietness helped him zone in like no one else. As a teenager, he would obsessively watch games, not for fun, but to study them. His routines were strict, his rituals unshakable. He didn't crave fame, he craved precision. People close to him say that even during massive wins, he didn't go wild with celebrations. He often stared at the crowd or the turf, lost in thought. This wasn't aloofness, it was depth. That's the thing about autism. It can make emotions harder to express, but it doesn't mean they're not felt. Often, they're felt even stronger. Today, Lionel Messi isn't just a world champion. He's a living legend. A player who became the best without being loud, without being flashy, without fitting any mold. During a live comedy show that surprised everyone, Elon Musk casually mentioned something most public figures avoid. He said he has Asperger's. It didn't seem like a big deal to him, but it said a lot about how his brain works. Musk isn't known for being smooth in conversation or relaxed in public, and that's part of why people sometimes find him hard to read. But when you look at what he's built, Tesla, SpaceX, Starlink, and even the recent steps toward AI integration, you start to understand that his thinking isn't typical. It's technical, visual, pattern-based, and often outside what most people consider possible. Musk doesn't just follow rules, he rewrites them, and that's common in many people with autism. They see gaps others miss. He dives deep into ideas, loses track of time, and hyper-focuses in a way that can lead to breakthroughs or complete silence in meetings. He doesn't pretend to be polished, and that makes him one of the most unpredictable minds in modern tech. Long before Musk was born, another man worked late into the night sketching out machines that the world wasn't ready for, Nikola Tesla. He could visualize entire devices in his head and rotate them mentally, correcting flaws without ever touching paper. That level of mental simulation is rare, and modern psychologists believe Tesla likely showed signs of autism. He hated bright lights and loud sounds, followed rigid daily schedules, and avoided physical touch. What others called eccentric, we now might understand as sensory sensitivity and routine-based thinking. Tesla wasn't interested in social status, he was obsessed with energy, frequencies, and the idea of wireless power. He'd walk 12 miles a day and do complex calculations in his mind for fun. His attention to invisible forces changed how the world uses electricity, but his awkwardness in business kept him in the shadows. The more he invented, the more people misunderstood him. Yet the ideas he left behind now fuel our wireless age. Like Tesla, Albert Einstein wasn't a fan of small talk. He spoke late as a child, preferred silence over chatter, and focused intensely on abstract problems. Modern biographers have often suggested he showed signs consistent with high-functioning autism. What stood out wasn't just his intelligence, but how his mind worked. It filtered out noise and honed in on pure logic and structure. Einstein once said he thought in images, not words. That alone gives a clue into how he reshaped physics. While others took years to grasp complex equations, he could mentally flip concepts like time and space as if they were puzzle pieces. He wasn't a great student, didn't enjoy school routines, and sometimes forgot simple tasks. But when it came to visualizing how light travels or how gravity bends reality, no one else even came close. Einstein's brain wasn't typical, and that's exactly why it worked in ways nobody expected. His silence held equations. His quiet changed the world. When Stephen Wiltshire was a child, he didn't speak. Teachers didn't know what to do with him, and at first, nobody realized that he was paying attention in a way no one else was. Diagnosed with autism at the age of 3, he began expressing himself through drawing long before he used words. One of his earliest obsessions was buildings. He'd sketch them endlessly with exact lines and stunning accuracy, down to the number of windows. That might sound impressive, but what truly sets him apart is what he can do from memory. Steven can look at a city skyline once, from a helicopter ride or a short drive, and then draw the entire thing in extreme detail without any reference. We're talking hundreds of buildings, perfect perspective, all from a single viewing. Experts call him a savant, someone whose brain, while different, is wired for brilliance in a specific area. His autism may make everyday conversation harder, but it gives him an edge that most artists can't imagine. He doesn't just copy what he sees, he captures it, stores it, and redraws it like a human camera. His work is now shown all over the world, not because of a label, but because no one else can do what he does. Anthony Hopkins doesn't fit the mold of the typical Hollywood star. He's private, meticulous, and admits he never quite understood people in the usual way. In recent years, he opened up about being on the autism spectrum, something he discovered later in life. It made a lot of sense. Hopkins has always described himself as socially distant, often overwhelmed by too much noise or emotional clutter. But give him a script and everything clicks into place. While some actors skim lines and improvise, Hopkins dives into the text like he's decoding a secret message. He reads scripts over 100 times, sometimes committing entire films to memory before shooting starts. That intense repetition, the need for routine, and the sharp focus, those are traits often linked to autism. But for Hopkins, they've been the foundation of legendary performances. From The Silence of the Lambs to The Father, he doesn't just act, he becomes the character, every word delivered with purpose. He doesn't play roles loudly, he plays them precisely. When people think of Tim Burton, they think of strange angles, pale faces, and gothic landscapes. But behind that eerie aesthetic is a director who's often said he felt like an outsider for most of his life. While never formally diagnosed, Burton has said in interviews that he believes he's on the autism spectrum. And once you know that, his movies start to look even more personal. Characters like Edward Scissorhands or Jack Skellington aren't just fictional, they're versions of himself. Burton has a way of taking emotions that are hard to describe, loneliness, obsession, fear of crowds, and turning them into entire worlds. He avoids big Hollywood events, prefers working in focused, quiet environments, and often sketches alone for hours to build his ideas. His autism traits, intense focus, visual thinking, and discomfort with social situations didn't block his creativity. They helped shape it. He didn't try to fit in. He built a universe where people like him already belonged. Charles Lutwidge Dodgson, better known as Lewis Carroll, wasn't just the man behind Alice's Adventures in Wonderland. He was a mathematician, photographer, and someone who didn't quite blend into ordinary life. He avoided eye contact, preferred routines, and spoke in an unusually formal way even with close acquaintances. Many researchers today suggest he likely showed signs of autism. Carroll was obsessed with puzzles, logic, and structure. He would write letters with mirror writing and craft word games that only he seemed to understand. But instead of seeing the world as others did, he reshaped it into something more curious. That's why Wonderland feels like a dream. It's a space where logic twists but always follows its own strange rules. Carroll's difficulty with social interactions and his strict habits didn't isolate him. They gave him access to a kind of creativity that didn't need to fit anyone's standard. He turned a boat ride with children into a book that's still read worldwide. His autism didn't keep him from making magic. It helped define the way he made it. Satoshi Tajiri wasn't the type to follow the crowd. As a kid in Japan, he rarely spoke, didn't connect easily with classmates, and often skipped school, not to rebel, but to collect insects. That obsession with bugs became the foundation for Pokemon, a game universe that would later take over the world. Tajiri is widely believed to be on the autism spectrum. He's described as someone who thinks in systems. He sees patterns, connections, and details that others overlook. When he created Pokemon, he wasn't chasing fame. He was building a world based on trading, discovery, and evolution, things he personally loved and understood. Tajiri doesn't often appear in public, and his interviews are rare. But the systems he designed are still growing decades later, now spanning games, TV shows, movies, and more. The very traits that made him different, focus, obsession, deep internal logic, are exactly what made Pokemon such a global success. He didn't just imagine a game, he created a culture, all because of how his mind works. He didn't care much for conversation, barely tolerated company, and often went days without speaking. Michelangelo wasn't just withdrawn, he was locked inside his work. Sculpting wasn't something he did, it was something he had to do. Scholars who've studied his letters and routines now believe he showed strong signs of autism, difficulty with social interaction, extreme sensitivity to noise and light, obsessive focus, and a near-total disregard for appearances or comfort. He slept fully clothed, skipped meals, and could work on a single detail for weeks. That intense focus produced some of the greatest art ever made. The David, the ceiling of the Sistine Chapel, the Pietà, each one a product of obsessive perfectionism. He didn't need instructions. He saw the final form trapped inside the marble and chipped away until it appeared. Michelangelo never chased fame. He chased clarity, precision, and beauty through silence. In many ways, he wasn't sculpting for others, he was trying to make sense of a world that didn't always make sense to him. Isaac Newton didn't play well with others. Not in school, not in meetings, not even in letters. He preferred solitude and structure, rarely spoke unless required, and kept notebooks filled with secrets and self-experiments. Today, many historians believe he likely showed classic signs of autism. He was hypersensitive to sounds, strictly ordered in his habits, and could concentrate on a single problem for months without distraction. That's how he discovered the laws of motion, how he figured out gravity, and how he built the foundation for modern physics, while locked away during a plague. Newton wasn't driven by recognition, he was driven by logic and the need to explain what others overlooked. He once said he could hold an idea in his mind without fatigue until he solved it. That's a rare gift, and one that often comes with autism. He wasn't just a scientist, he was a builder of invisible systems, the kind most people can't even begin to see. Where others asked questions, Newton built the answers. Stanley Kubrick didn't like to explain himself. He rarely gave interviews, avoided premieres, and was known for his obsession with control. On set, he'd ask actors to repeat the same scene dozens of times, sometimes over 100. Not to frustrate them, but because his mind locked onto exact timing, subtle gestures, shadows falling just right. Many who've worked with him or studied his behavior now suggest he likely showed signs of autism. He followed rigid routines, disliked social chaos, and thought visually in extreme detail. He storyboarded entire films down to individual camera angles before shooting began. To him, each film was a puzzle that had to be solved perfectly, whether it was 2001: A Space Odyssey or The Shining. His scripts weren't just words, they were engineering. Kubrick's discomfort in crowds and fixation on visual order helped him build movies that felt cold to some but hypnotic to others. He didn't want realism, he wanted structure. His autism didn't block creativity. It refined it, filtered it, and sharpened every frame into something unforgettable. Andy Warhol once said, "I like boring things." And he meant it. He painted soup cans, dollar bills, and celebrities again and again. Not because he ran out of ideas, but because his brain was wired to see the power in patterns. Warhol's routine-driven life, flat tone in interviews, and discomfort in social situations have led many experts to believe he likely had autism. He didn't connect with people easily, but he connected with imagery in a way few ever have. Repetition calmed him. It wasn't laziness, it was precision, ritual, order. His studio, the factory, became a strange mix of chaos and control. But even then, he maintained his distance. He filmed hours of uncut footage, watched real life like it was a movie, and often avoided eye contact. Yet, he became the face of pop art. The man who wore wigs used a tape recorder to talk for him, and rarely showed emotion turned his quirks into a visual language. Warhol didn't care about traditional beauty. He cared about presence, familiarity, icons. In a world where everything moves fast, he made us stare at the same thing until it looked different. His autism didn't isolate him from art, it allowed him to transform it. Mozart was writing music before he could form full sentences. By age 5, he had composed his first pieces. By 6, he was performing for royalty. That kind of talent seems almost impossible unless you consider how his mind might have worked. While there's no diagnosis from his time, many modern researchers believe Mozart likely showed traits consistent with autism, hypersensitivity to sound, intense routine, emotional outbursts, and hyperfocus on specific interests. He was often described as socially awkward, prone to sudden mood shifts, and overwhelmed by sensory input. But give him a piano or a quill and he entered a different world entirely. He didn't just write music, he absorbed it, transformed it, and reassembled it in ways others couldn't imagine. Entire symphonies formed in his mind before he wrote them down, and he could play complex pieces after hearing them once. His letters were filled with odd wordplay and patterns, almost like he was trying to communicate in a rhythm only he understood. In social settings, he sometimes laughed inappropriately or repeated phrases over and over. But when composing, his thinking became crystal clear. Mozart didn't just hear music, he saw its structure, its layers, its math. His brain processed sound at a level most people never reach. That same brain may have made the world confusing and chaotic, but it also gave us over 600 works that still move audiences centuries later. His autism didn't block genius, it helped compose it. Charles Darwin spent years studying barnacles, not for money or fame, but because something about their tiny shells fascinated him. He cataloged thousands of specimens, documented microscopic differences, and kept mountains of notes. That obsessive attention to detail, along with his aversion to social gatherings and strict routines, has led many modern scholars to suggest he likely had autism. Darwin avoided loud environments, preferred solitary walks, and followed daily habits so precisely that even his family kept to them. But that's what made his thinking so powerful. He didn't just glance at nature, he examined it endlessly. When he sailed on the Beagle, he wasn't there as a thrill seeker. He was collecting, sketching, sorting, and trying to understand how everything connected. That intense focus helped him form a theory that changed science forever: evolution through natural selection. Darwin's brain wasn't quick to socialize, but it never stopped analyzing. His quiet persistence, not his charm, is what reshaped biology. Bobby Fischer could sit at a chessboard for 8 hours without blinking. He didn't just play chess, he lived inside it. From childhood, he showed extreme intensity, refusing to discuss anything except the game. His lack of eye contact, social struggles, obsession with routines, and rigid behavior have all been cited by experts as signs of autism. He would memorize entire games, study opponents for hours, and replay matches in his head with flawless accuracy. By 14, he was already a U.S. champion. At 29, he became world champion by defeating Boris Spassky during the Cold War, with millions watching. But outside the game, Fischer was withdrawn and unpredictable. He distrusted people, avoided interviews, and often isolated himself. His genius came from absolute focus, pattern recognition, and a brain that could process moves dozens of layers ahead. Autism may have made everyday life harder for him, but on the board it gave him an unmatched edge. He didn't just understand chess, he was chess. Bill Gates has always been different. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but he was often the smartest and the most focused. Long before founding Microsoft, Gates would spend days buried in books, sometimes reading encyclopedias cover to cover. In recent years, many psychologists and tech writers have pointed out how his behavior, especially in his youth, reflected traits commonly associated with autism: intense fixation on subjects, difficulty with small talk, social awkwardness, and strict personal routines. Gates has never confirmed a diagnosis, but his deep, narrow focus on computing, his habit of pacing while thinking, and his tendency to zone out when deeply engaged are all markers often found in people on the spectrum. What made Gates so successful wasn't just intelligence, it was his ability to lock on to problems and not let go. While others were enjoying college life, he was writing code late into the night. He would often memorize pages of technical information and dive into systems with zero interest in distractions. That kind of obsessive attention helped him spot where software was going and get there first. Even his quiet demeanor in public hasn't stopped him from shaping the modern tech world. Gates may not have been the most charismatic CEO, but he was the one with the clearest vision. That's what turned a computer hobby into a global transformation. Steve Jobs didn't just care about how things worked, he cared about how they looked, how they felt, and how they connected to people. But getting that vision across wasn't always easy. He could be intense, obsessive, and extremely demanding. Former colleagues often said he fixated on the smallest details, sometimes changing entire product timelines over the curve of a button or the shade of a color. In recent years, more and more tech insiders and researchers have suggested that Jobs may have shown traits associated with autism. He struggled with empathy in personal relationships, followed strict habits, and showed a kind of tunnel vision that, while difficult for teams, made Apple's devices into cultural icons. Jobs wasn't a coder, but he was a systems thinker. He could hold the design, function, and user experience of a product in his head all at once. That kind of layered thinking is rare and often found in people on the spectrum. He wasn't just a businessman, he was someone who reimagined how technology could feel human. Even his infamous keynote presentations followed precise emotional rhythms. He disliked meetings without structure, avoided small talk, and often preferred walking alone while thinking. Jobs didn't fit the mold of a typical CEO, but that's exactly why his ideas shaped the world we live in today. His mind didn't move in a straight line, it connected dots most people didn't even see. When Tom Stoltman walks into a room, people see size. 6'8", over 400 pounds of muscle. What they don't always see is the diagnosis behind the world records. Tom is openly autistic, and he talks about it with the same honesty he brings to competition. Diagnosed at age 5, he spent his childhood dealing with anxiety, isolation, and the feeling of being different. But what autism took from his social life, it gave back in razor-sharp focus. He trains harder, lifts smarter, and blocks out distractions with a kind of mental discipline that few can match. Tom doesn't treat strongman as just a sport. It's his structure, his rhythm, his way to navigate a chaotic world. He repeats training patterns obsessively, studies his own technique in extreme detail, and visualizes lifts long before touching the barbell. That's how he became the first person with autism to win the title of World's Strongest Man, and then won it again. He's not just carrying stones or flipping tires, he's showing that strength comes in more than one form. For Tom, autism isn't a weakness. It's part of what makes him unshakable under pressure, calm in the storm, and locked into his goal. He didn't just beat the odds, he crushed them. From the chessboard to the cinema screen, from the concert hall to the weightlifting stage, these individuals weren't held back by autism. In many cases, it gave them the edge they needed to change their fields forever. Their minds didn't follow the usual rules, and that's exactly what made them great. They weren't trying to be typical, they were just being themselves, fully and unforgettably. That's about it. Which of these geniuses surprised you the most? Write in the comments. For more useful information, watch other videos.